the cardiovascular system, and I'm going to be going pretty fast, so you might have to go back through the PowerPoint. It'll be linked to look at the other details. So the cardiovascular system, or also known as the circulatory system, is responsible for transporting nutrients and important materials to body cells and then also taking the waste away from those body cells. And the main components of the cardiovascular system are the heart, blood vessels, and blood. So the cardiovascular system carries out many important functions, including circulating oxygen to the body cells and then removing carbon dioxide from those body cells, transporting nutrients, removing metabolic waste products from body cells, protecting the body from disease and infection by transferring white blood cells, stopping the loss of blood by clotting blood, transporting hormones, maintaining an ideal body temperature, and maintaining fluid balance. So as you can see, the cardiovascular system also plays an important role in maintaining the homeostasis of the body throughout all of these functions. So again, the components of the cardiovascular system are the heart, the veins, the arteries, the capillaries, and the blood itself. So the heart is a hollow and muscular organ, and it works independently from the rest of the body and the nervous system because it creates its own electrical impulses which help it pump out blood. And so the heart has unique tissue called cardiac muscle tissue found only in the heart, and this is involuntary tissue and it is branched and striated. And the heart has three layers. The inner layer is called the endocardium, the middle layer is called the epicardium, and the outer layer is called the myocardium. And then there's a protective membrane around the heart called the pericardium. And the heart has four chambers. So in the lower heart, there are the left and right ventricles, and in the upper heart, there are the left and right atria. And there are valves in between the chambers. So here we see the left and right atria up in the upper heart, and the left and right ventricles in the lower heart, and then the valves that connect each of them. And then here are the blood vessels that connect to the heart, which we'll talk more about later. And then you can see the different layers of the heart as well. So there are four valves in the heart in between each of the chambers, which are the mitral valve, the tricuspid valve, the aortic valve, and the pulmonary valve. And valves work by opening and closing to control the flow of blood, and they open and close according to whether the heart is in diastole or systole. So diastole is when the heart is relaxed and the chambers are filling with blood, and the systole is when the heart beats and contracts and pushes the blood out. So the mitral valve, which is between the left atrium and left ventricle up here, it's open during diastole to allow the blood to flow in, and then closed during systole so that there's pressure for the blood to pump out there. And then similarly on the other side, there's the tricuspid valve, which is also open during diastole and closed during systole. And then back again on the left side, there is aortic valve between the left ventricle and the aorta, which is closed during diastole so that the blood doesn't flow through there, and then open during systole so that the blood can be pumped up to the aorta. And then similarly on the other side, there's the pulmonary valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary arteries, and that is closed during diastole and open during systole. So I'm going to map out quickly how the blood flows through the heart. So we start with deoxygenated blood coming in through the inferior and superior vena cava into the right atrium, and then it flows through the tricuspid valve during diastole into the right ventricle. And then during systole, when the heart contracts, it goes up through the pulmonary valve and through the pulmonary arteries. And the pulmonary arteries are the only arteries in the body that carry deoxygenated blood, and they carry that blood to the lungs to become oxygenated. And then the oxygenated blood is brought back through the pulmonary veins, which you can see come from both sides, and they enter into the left atrium. And then during diastole, they go through the mitral valve into the left ventricle, and then during systole, they're pushed out through the aortic valve into the aorta and out to the body. So you can see in this diagram, the right side of the heart is blue, and the left side of the heart is red. So the blue side is representing where the deoxygenated blood goes in the heart, and the red side is representing where the oxygenated blood goes in the heart. So arteries are blood vessels that take blood away from the heart. and they're highly elastic and have smooth muscle, which allow them to dilate and constrict and control blood flow. And arteries branch down into smaller vessels, which are called arterioles. And then the aorta, which we just saw in the heart, is the largest artery in the body. And the arteries contain 3 layers: the intima, which is the inner layer, the media, which is the middle layer, and the adventitia, which is the outer layer. And so the intima is made up of endothelium smooth tissue, which we talked about helps it to control the blood flow. The media is made up of muscle, because the arterial system is a high pressure system, so that muscle layer allows arteries to withstand that high pressure. And then the adventitia is made up of connective tissues that allow arteries to anchor to other tissues. And then veins are blood vessels that carry blood to the heart. And veins are pretty similar to arteries, except for they're smaller and less elastic, but they also can dilate and constrict. But unlike the arterial system, the venous system is a low pressure system. So as you can see then down here in the media, the layer of muscle is smaller in veins. So smaller veins are called venules. And then again, the veins have similar structure to arteries with the intima, except for veins don't have the endothelium. And some of them have valves. And then the media, and like I talked about, the muscle layer is a little bit smaller in veins. And then the adventitia, which is the same outer layer of connective tissue. And then capillaries are the smallest type of blood vessels. They're very, very small. And they actually carry out the different gas exchange and material exchange processes. So they do these processes by either passive diffusion, which is like the natural diffusion from high concentration to low concentration, and then penocytosis, which is just when the body's cells actively take in molecules. So there are 3 types of capillaries. Continuous capillaries are the most common type and least leakiest, but they contain small gaps between the endothelial cells and their walls. So they allow for some smaller types of molecules to pass through their walls. And fenestrated capillaries are the leakier type of capillaries, and they contain those same small gaps between the wall cells, and they also contain small pores in the walls. And so they allow for slightly larger molecules to diffuse across. And then there are the sinusoid capillaries, which are the rarest and leakiest type of capillaries because they have big and small gaps between their cells, and they also have pores in the walls. And so these capillaries allow for large molecules and even full cells to diffuse across. So like I talked about, capillaries actually are involved in the exchange processes. So you can see over here, they do gas exchange with the lungs. So here is an alveoli, which is like a tiny air sac in the lung, and you can see the capillaries come in, and they're carrying in deoxygenated blood from the pulmonary arteries, and then they give the CO2, which is waste products from body cells, to the alveoli, and then the alveoli gives the blood oxygen. So then the blood becomes oxygenated. So that's the gas exchange process that the capillaries carry out in the lungs. And then there's the gas exchange and material exchange process that capillaries also carry out with body cells. So this is when they give oxygen and nutrients, they diffuse it across into the cell, and the cell gives metabolic waste and carbon dioxide to the capillaries to then bring back to the lungs and start the whole exchange process over again. So then blood is the central substance of the cardiovascular system, and it's also known as a fluid of life. And it's a fluid of life because it provides the body with nutrition, oxygen, waste removal, and other important materials. So the blood is composed of plasma, erythrocytes or red blood cells, leukocytes or white blood cells, and thrombocytes or platelets. So plasma is the largest part of the blood. So you can see here is a tube of separated blood, and the plasma makes up about 55% of the blood, and when it's separated, it's this kind of liquidy yellowish substance. So plasma is important because it carries nutrients and waste, and it also contains antibodies, clotting factors, and important proteins. Erythrocytes, or red blood cells, are the second largest component of blood. So you can see down here in the separated blood, they're down at the bottom, and they make up about 41% of blood. So red blood cells are these small, flexible, biconcave discs, which means that the periphery is larger, and then the centers are these concaves. And they transport oxygen and also carbon dioxide, so they help with that gas exchange. and they contain a protein called hemoglobin, which is the actual substance that oxygen and carbon dioxide bind to. They also carry 70% of the body's iron, so that's an important mineral in our body, and red blood cells are made in bone marrow. Leukocytes are white blood cells, and leukocytes are actually larger than red blood cells, but they make up a smaller portion of the blood. So if we go back and look at this separated blood, right here, this small little white zone, which is a buffer zone between the plasma and the red blood cells, that is 4% of the blood, and it is made up of both leukocytes and thrombocytes. And leukocytes or white blood cells are important because they play a key role in the immune system and immune response. Thrombocytes are platelets, and again, together with the white blood cells, they make up this little buffer zone, which is about 4% of blood. And thrombocytes are not fully formed cells. They're just, they contain fragments of cells called megakaryocytes. And platelets are sticky, and so they all come together and form platelet plugs, which help to mend tears and breaks in blood vessels, and they initiate blood clotting processes. So they keep us from losing too much blood if there's a bleeding injury. So the body systems in our body are not isolated mechanisms. Instead, they work all together to create this network that supports homeostasis throughout the body. So the cardiovascular system is connected to pretty much every other system in the body, but is especially closely related to the respiratory, endocrine, and immune systems. So we talked about this before, the gas exchange processes. That's how the cardiovascular system is connected to the respiratory system, because as you can see here, the capillaries cover these alveoli, which are the air sacs in the lungs, and they carry out that gas exchange process. So the cardiovascular system is also closely related to the endocrine system because blood contains hormones, and it helps the endocrine system to transport those hormones to target cells and organs. And then the cardiovascular system is also closely connected to the immune system or lymphatic system. So as you can see over here, here are all the body cells spanning throughout the body, and it closely mirrors the lymph nodes throughout the body and the lymphatic system. And then as we talked about, the blood transports white blood cells and antibodies, so that also helps the immune system. And then the cardiovascular system is connected to the skeletal system because red and white blood cells are created by bone marrow in those bones. And then the cardiovascular system is also related to the digestive system because blood transports nutrients, minerals, and vitamins that are broken down by the digestive system. So then just to end off, there are some fun facts. If you were to take out all the body's blood vessels and stretch them out, they would stretch 60,000 miles, which means that one human's blood vessels can wrap around the earth 2.5 times. And then capillaries are very, very small, so some are only about 1/10 of the diameter of a strand of hair. So we talked about the shape of red blood cells. And they're very flexible because they have to be able to go through these tiny, tiny, tiny capillaries. And then another fun fact is that the heart can still beat after being removed from the body because, as we talked about, it has its own electric impulses separate from the nervous system or any other body system. And then, as you can see over here, here's a hieroglyph of ancient Egyptians measuring or weighing the heart, because ancient Egyptians believed that the heart was the center of the body. So they believed that the heart, not the brain, was the center of thought, emotion, and memory. So what we now know to be the function of the brain is what ancient Egyptians believed to be the function of the heart. So that's about it, and you can check out the PowerPoint to read a little bit closely and complete the guided notes.